For those of you who are still tuning in, we're going to look at blood today. I'm going to separate this PowerPoint into two pieces. So we'll do the first 17 slides today and then the rest of them tomorrow, and then put the quiz on for after that. There is a sheet that goes with this, just a little chart with some diagrams of the different blood cells on it. You can print it off if you want to and just fill it in, or just kind of sketch the blood cells out and put that in your notes. It's entirely up to you. All right, so let's just get ourselves started. So if we're looking at blood, so blood is made up of a number of components. So one of the things that they're made up of are our red blood cells, or our erythrocytes, or sometimes you'll hear them called red corpuscles as well. We can short form them as RBCs. That's completely fine. We also have our white blood cells, our WBCs, which are also called leukocytes, which may be called white corpuscles as well, if you ever see that written down. We have our platelets, and we have the liquid portion that's called the plasma. So we're going to be looking at each of these parts of the blood in a little bit more detail. So also in the blood, kind of you don't really think about this, but it also contains minerals. So we've got some minerals in there, like our iron, our magnesium, things like that. We've got our hormones that are circling around in there. We've got our gases. So this is where we do think about, the blood being in, or about gases being in our blood. We always talk about oxygen, carbon dioxide being in our blood. And we've got our various sugars that have to be transported around the body. So the first thing we're going to look at here is of these three things, sorry about this, of the first thing, the red blood cells, white blood cells, and the platelets, those are called the formed elements. So if you hear people talk about the formed elements of blood, these are the cells that are in the blood, or in terms of the platelets, the pieces of the cells. So here we have a diagram. We've got 55% of your blood is made up of plasma, 1% is made up of the white blood cells and the platelets, and 44% of your blood is red blood cells. So those are approximate amounts that are in there. So as you can see, most of your blood is made up of this liquidy, watery plasma stuff. All right, so what's in plasma? So plasma is slightly alkaline. So if you were looking at the pH of it, it would just be just above 7, so around 7.2, 7.4, which is, again, remember we talked about how your body has to be within a range of pH for those enzymes to work properly. So your plasma, it always tries to keep itself within that pH range. So you can't have like an alkaline diet or an acidotic diet, because you'll like really mess up your whole entire enzyme system. So it's yellowish in color. If you've ever scraped your knee on something and it's kind of like leaking fluid, it's kind of that yellowy fluid, that's sort of what plasma looks like. Of the plasma, 90% of that plasma is water and 10% is dry matter. So if you took plasma and you boiled it on your stove to get all the water off, 10% of what would be left behind would be that dry matter. And of the dry matter, let's look and see what the dry matter is. So the dry matter is 1 part mineral. So these are things like your iron or your magnesium or calcium, whatever it is. And those minerals are dissolved in ionic form. So if you've got calcium going around your body, it's not fizzing away there like we have the calcium in the lab in the water. It's an ionic form, which is a little bit more stable. And then we've got 9 parts organic substances. So the organic substances, what makes up the organic substances? So these are anything that is carbon-based. So we've got your sugars, your glucoses, we've got your lipids, so your fats, your hormones that are circling around, so your sex hormones or your adrenaline, anything like that. We've got amino acids that have been broken down in your digestive system. You've got your vitamins. You have any nitrogenous waste, so all that cell waste. And you've got different types of proteins. Okay, my neighbor's driving up and down his four-wheeler, so you might hear him. Sorry about that. All right, so those plasma proteins are pretty important. We're going to talk about the next 3 plasma proteins, or the 3 plasma proteins. So what are the plasma proteins? Well, the first one are your globulins. So you might hear about people talking about getting immunoglobulin therapy and stuff like that when they're very, very sick. So globulins are important proteins. They're important to fight infections. Then we have fibrinogen. So fibrinogen is really important in the blood clotting process. So we need our fibrinogen to help with blood clotting. What happens with fibrinogen is it'll eventually break down into fibrin. We'll take, like, cut a little piece off it. You don't want to have the fibrin circulating around, because that will start to clot. So you want it in a form that's not activated, and that's the fibrinogen. And then you have your albumin. Now, albumin is really important for maintaining blood volume. Now, a lot of times what happens when you see starving children in countries where they have the big bloated bellies, what that's from is they don't have enough albumin. They haven't had enough protein in their diet, so they don't have enough albumin in their blood to keep the water in the blood. So the blood leaks out of the blood vessels, out of the capillaries, and it pools in different parts of their body. So that's why they end up with the big bellies, because it's basically water that can't stay in the bloodstream because they're starving, or they don't have enough protein in their diet. All right, next thing. We've got formed elements. So let's look at the formed elements. This is where, if you want, you can use the sheets to put some details down there. If you don't want to, or you don't have to, right? Just kind of sketch out the cells to have, that muscle memory thing where you'll actually remember what the cells look like. It'll make it a little bit easier when you do the quiz. So your red blood cells, like we said, they're the most numerous blood cells. So you have about 4 to 6 million in 1 millimeter cubed amount of blood. So if you take a tiny little dab of blood, there's 4 to 6 million little red blood cells in there. That's crazy. There's no nucleus in animal or red blood cells when they're mature. So if you're looking at a blood smear and you see a lot of red blood cells that still have the nucleus in them, you're going to know there's something wrong with the formation of red blood cells, because when red blood cells are mature, when they're circulating around carrying oxygen, they no longer have a nucleus in them. So they have that shape of a biconcave lens where they kind of, I always say it looks like a tubing, like a tubing tube, like for on the water, like a tube. I always say it kind of looks like that. They're rich in hemoglobin, so this is another protein that's really, really important for carrying the iron. Well, it's got iron in it. It's really important for carrying the oxygen around. So the hemoglobin is important to make sure it delivers the oxygen to the tissues. And the hemoglobin also helps a little bit to carry carbon dioxide back to the lungs through the blood system, right? It's not the number one way, but it also does carry a little bit of carbon dioxide, because most of the carbon dioxide is carried by the plasma. So their life cycle is about 120 days. So every 120 days, the red blood cells are recycled in your body and fresh new ones are made. So here's what it looks like from the side. So it kind of looks like a biconcave lens, or like I say, those tubing, the tubes for tubing. When you see them under the microscope, they kind of have this darker outer rim and a little bit lighter in here where the nucleus would have been. So they've kind of collapsed. All right, our next one are platelets, which can also be called the thrombocytes. So your platelets, their number one job is to stop bleeding. That is their job. So their main function is to stop the loss of blood from wounds. That's called hematostasis. What they do is they aggregate. So if you've got an injury, what they will do is they'll sense anything that's broken. Anytime a membrane breaks in your body, or your blood vessels break, whatever it is, they'll send chemical signals out around the blood. I have to cough. Sorry. And what they'll do is they'll send a signal, and the platelets will aggregate to that spot where there's been a wound. And what these guys do is they actually help to clog, and at the same time what they do is they release these factors which promote blood coagulation. Now the chemicals, which are just called factors, that's just the word that they call them for these chemicals, they're really important in blood clotting. So for people with hemophilia, sometimes what they're missing are these factors. So they may be low on platelets, or the platelets may not produce these factors which help with blood clotting. So they're not real cells. They're actually pieces of cells that have just kind of like bashed up. They're only 2 to 3 micrometers in size. Oh my gosh. Of course I have to have a coughing fit when I'm doing this. And the density in the blood is about 200,000 to 300 per cubic millimeter. So in that tiny little drop of blood, you've got 6 million red blood cells and 200 to 300,000 little platelets. All right, our next guys here. All right, first is a picture. So this is showing your red blood cell. Here's a white blood cell. and here's what your platelets. So you can see how they're kind of like jiggity jaggedy, you know, a little hook here. So if they're helping to clot blood, they can kind of like cling on to each other or kind of get enmeshed with each other to help clot wounds. Okay, so next one are your white blood cells, which are also called your leukocytes, which I said you can also call white corpuscles. Remember, again, you can also, in like older books, they'll call them red corpuscles and white corpuscles, which corpuscles just means like little bodies. So they're white little bodies, little things that are in the blood. But their main role is immunity. And there's a number of different types of white blood cells. And again, if you go into biology and you go into any blood chemistry stuff or stuff about blood, you're going to find that there's even more than we're doing right now. Each of them have a different function, and they can be two different types. So they can be granulocytes, which mean they have grains in them, or they can be agranulocytes, so no grains. So a gran, meaning they have granules, and cytes meaning cells, so they're grain cells. And these ones mean, this A means without, so these are cells without the grains. They have no grains in them. All right, so the first ones are the neutrophils. So the neutrophils, their job basically is they're eaters. They're kind of like the first line of defense against bacteria or viruses or fungi, or if you have unfamiliar cells. They're the ones that go in and they are going to go out to eat things. So they're the first ones that you look for. Or not the first ones you look for. They're kind of like the first line of trying to kill things. All right, so they are present in large amount in the pus of your wound. So if you have one of those pussy wounds and you ever put a smear under the microscope, you'll see a whole pile of these neutrophils in there. So they die fairly quickly. They live about 6 hours to a few days, because remember, their job is first line battle. They're circulating around. They're constantly being replaced because you always want to have these fresh little soldier guys ready to go out and do battle. So these guys are going to look okay, so here's all your red blood cells. Remember we said they're kind of dark on the outside and lighter in the center. Your neutrophils here, you can't really see the grains that much in here, but you can tell this kind of has a bumpy appearance in the cytoplasm. And these guys have it. This is all one nucleus, but it's joined together with these little strands. So they have little, it's a multi-lobe nucleus. We call it a multi-lobe nucleus. And this type is a granulocyte, so it's got a multi-lobe nucleus. So usually you'll see 3 or 4 of these lobes on these blood cells. The next one are called eosinophils. Now they're called eosinophils because they stain really nicely with this stain that's called eosinophil. But these guys you'll find if you've got a worm type parasite, so if you've got tapeworm or something like that, you'll find eosinophils, or if you've got hookworm, something like that. They also tend to play a role in asthma and allergy response. So if you see eosinophils, it's not that you have a huge parasite all the time and maybe having a major asthma or allergy attack. These guys live about 8 to 12 days. And these guys have a bilobe nucleus. So, and you can see here, you can see these grains a little bit better in here, all right? And here's the nucleus, it's bilobe. So there's a tiny little string in here that connect the two lobes together. But these eosinophils are bilobed. All right, and they are also granulocytes because they've got the little grains in them. So these guys you'll also find if you're having an allergy attack to certain medications. So if you were on sulfonamides for a bacterial infection and you're allergic to sulfa, you would find these types of white blood cells, or if you have a aspirin allergy, something like that, you had some type of allergic reaction to your medications, and they're like your intermediate allergy response guys. All right, our next guys are our basophils. Now these ones are really easy to see because you basically cannot see the nucleus in them. So these guys are going to respond to foreign substances in the body, and again, these guys are going to be major defense in allergies and asthma. So this is where you're having a full-blown attack. So these guys are going to be found if you've been exposed like over to a long time to different allergens, if you've had some parasites like a tick. And what they do is they secrete a histamine for your inflammatory response. So this is when you're having that huge, big, ruddy nose, ruddy eyes, you know, sneezing, all sorts of stuff. This is when you're having a major allergy attack. You're going to be seeing these guys circulating around. What they're going to do is they also secrete some heparin to thin the blood. And this basophil, like I said, they're so grainy that you basically cannot see the nucleus, and they have a very distinct blue stain. These guys live a few hours to a few days, and here you can see in this picture here, you can't even see the nucleus in here. They stain quite darkly because of the number of grains that are in them. So they can have a bilobed or a trilobed nucleus, which usually you're not going to be able to see if this particular type of stain is used. And keep in mind again, they're also granulocytes. Alrighty, so now we're going to get on to the agranulocytes, guys. So one of the kids a couple years ago said, "Oh, all the phils have freckles," and I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, phils. If you think of like a phil is like a guy's name, and you think about the freckles as being granules or the whatever, yeah, you can. Those are or the granules as being freckles. All the phils have freckles. So I've always remembered it that way. You don't have to, but I thought that was kind of cute." All right, so the lymphocytes here. So these guys, the lymphocytes are found in blood, your lymphatic tissue. So any of your, you say you have swollen glands, that's where you're going to find your lymphocytes. You're going to find them in your organs and any lymph fluid. So these guys are a defense against pathogenic microorganisms again. These guys, some can live for years, some can live for weeks. So sometimes if you've had an infection, the lymphocytes will still, from that infection, will still be kicking around to remember what the bad guy kind of looked like. So some of the lymphocytes that your body is going to produce are T cells. So these are the ones that are going to stick around, kind of remembering, what the bad guy looks like. B cells and natural killer cells. So these ones here, they don't have grains, so you'll see the cytoplasm here is very, very clear compared to our phils. And this has one nice round, kind of, it might not be perfectly round. Sometimes they are perfectly round. Sometimes it kind of has a little dent in it. But this is basically, when you compare them to the phils, you can tell this nucleus is pretty complete. So this has a large, dark stained eccentric shaped nucleus, and this one's an agranulocyte. And here's our monocytes. Now our monocytes will eventually develop into macrophages, and the macrophages are like gigantic cells. They're just gigantic white cells that just go around and just gobble bad things up. So these ones are larger than the other ones normally. These guys mature in the bone marrow, and they stay in circulation for about 24 to 36 hours. So these guys are really important to go in where there's an inflammation site with big battles happening. We've got bacteria in there. We've got our other white blood cells in there trying to do stuff. These guys kind of come in like the great big hulks and just kind of just start eating crap. All right. They also produce some defensive substances. And here you can see they're monstrously sized. So we say they have a kidney-shaped nucleus. Sometimes they actually look like a horseshoe-shaped nucleus as well. But they are much, much, much bigger than the regular white blood cells. Here's another picture. You can see the size of these guys, like the great big hulky, go in there and start to kill things like crazy. All right, so that is it for today. That's our 17th slide. So tomorrow we'll do the second thing, and then I'll put a quiz up for that. All right, so talk to you again.